Hello and welcome to Members on the Mic with the Troy Chamber of Commerce, where we connect with local Troy Chamber members as they give us a glimpse into their company and share some of the business lessons they learned along the way. Hi everyone, I'm Tara Tomczyk-Husak, President and CEO of the Troy Chamber of Commerce, and I am joined today by our amazing co-host and Vice President of the Chamber, Sheila Denstead.
Hello everyone.
First, I'd like to take a moment and thank our presenting sponsor, Trion Solutions. Stay tuned for our very first commercial break where you can learn how you can rely on Trion. So Sheila, we have a very fun and creative guest today. Why don't you do some introductions?
I am excited to. Yes. Today we're meeting with Mark Lantz, founder and executive creative director of Factory Detroit, Inc. Mark has been best known as one of the creators of the groundbreaking Pure Michigan brand and campaign, something I think we all here know very well. Not only did he provide the strategic guidance for the campaign at its inception and through its first 3 years, he also came up with the brand line Pure Michigan, which is now seen on welcome signs, milk bottles, produce crates, and license plates all around the Great Lakes state. That all happened during his time as Chief Strategy Officer at McCann Erickson in Detroit, where he also led all things strategy on Colonial Williamsburg, Children's Hospital of Michigan, Detroit Medical Center, General Motors, Aldi Food Stores, and more. Excuse me. In 2013, after more than 20 years working for some of the largest national and global ad agencies, Mark made a major career change and founded one of the country's smallest boutique advertising firms, Factory Detroit, Inc., focusing on branding, advertising, and design with an office in Troy, Michigan. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate the invitation.
Well, thank you so much. So, Mark, just to get things started, obviously you have a very wide variety and a background in this industry. Can we talk a little bit about why or what are some of the bigger differences between a larger agency and obviously you created your own smaller boutique agency? What are some of those differences?
I will summarize those differences in two things. One is 20 cents, and the other is New York. We'll start with New York. When you're part of a network, a big agency network, and I was here, when I moved here, I was at McCann Erickson. I worked at Foot Building in San Francisco. I worked at Ogilvy and Mather in Chicago. You have a headquarters office who calls a lot of the shots. And so often they want you to do things a certain way, which may not fit your clients, because if you have an office back when I worked in San Francisco, we had offices in New York and Chicago, around the world, and each office had its own mix of clients. And so what New York wanted wasn't necessarily what your client needed. So when you're on your own, well, you don't have to call anybody. You don't have to run anything by the folks in New York. You don't have to get permission. You can just do what you want to do to benefit your clients. So we like that. It's a very welcome difference from being a big agency guy for all those years. And then when I say 20 cents is the other difference is when the agency I worked for was taken over, when I was in San Francisco, was taken over by one of the even bigger networks. We were a network agency, and we were acquired by an even bigger network. And at the big summer meeting they had, where they bring all the leaders from around, the CEO said, he holds up a dollar bill and he says, "See this? 20 cents out of every one of these comes to me." Meaning, when you get paid by your clients, 20 cents goes to the big corporate entity. They have guaranteed profit, which is, I'm sure, fine for them. Profit's fine, but as opposed to earning that 20 cents by creating value for your clients. And there's incentives as well to be able to deliver more than 20 cents to basically to New York again. And so here, things we can do as an independent ad agency include, taking on clients that might be too small otherwise, but it would be fun to work on, and we're pretty much a soft touch when it comes to somebody who has a very small budget, like a nonprofit with a little itty bitty budget, but we can help them out and we find a way. Things that when you're a big corporate ad agency, you just can't do as often because some bean counter in New York says no. And so independence is the first reward of being an independent agency.
Well, and it sounds like you have a lot of flexibility because, like you said, if you are put in a box and this is the style of marketing that you have to do, now you have the ability to actually work one-on-one with those clients and make sure it's exactly what they're looking for and use your own kind of creativity in that.
Exactly. Every client has a different situation. I mean, there are things you learn from client to client to client that add up, but every client has, different competitive set. They have different marketing problems. They have different cultures. They have different values. They have different,
even people they're
attitudes.
going after. They're marketing who their clients are.
Exactly. And so, what we find is that, listening is better than talking. I used to get, I think I got dinged a few times at one of the corporate agencies I worked for, because we were in a meeting with big clients, and a lot of the New York people showing up at that meeting, they wanted to show off how smart they were. And so they did a lot of talking in these introductory meetings. And I thought, well, we're there to listen and learn and ask smart questions, but not go off on these big tangents of blah, 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 blah. I mean, I can do that with the best of them, but I prefer to get a little listening in. So they say you learn more with your mouth closed and your ears open.
It's very true. It's very true. And you need to know what's going on, which kind of leads us into our next question is, what are the challenges and the problems you're seeing in the advertising world today, especially for those medium to smaller size businesses and the nonprofits that you mentioned?
Everything has gotten complex. There are more. The marketplace is more segmented. There's more communication channels than ever before. There's just more communication. If you think about when you drove from your house to your office, how many logos you passed just on that drive. You're driving up Big Beaver Road, 16 Mile, and there's all those restaurants and all those stores and all this and that and the hotels, et cetera. And it is not uncommon to pass hundreds of logos just in your morning drive. Then you're on the internet. There's just so much clutter. And how does someone who doesn't have a giant budget, who doesn't have millions of dollars to spend, how do they, stand out from the crowd? That's the probably the most important challenge that's faced, is how do you make a small budget act bigger than it really is? And I think that's number one. And number two is how do you say something different? How do you stand for something different? And on top of that, I'd say there's a third one, which is something we run into a lot, which is, how can you make your communication as good as your product? There's a lot of companies that have really good products, good services, they're good companies, and their branding and their marketing and their communication is kind of, it's kind of homey, and doesn't really look as quality as their product is. We've worked with I think a number of brands over the years that we've helped kind of raise up what they do and bring it to another level. And just by looking better, sounding better, having smarter things to talk about, helps differentiate that as well. But standing out is the big thing. It is a crowded world out there.
How do you deal with business owners that may not see it that way, that think they have a quality advertising campaign and a quality product?
Well, you can only do so much to change their mind, and we see it all the time where it's like, sometimes we see somebody, they've got a logo. And I, one of my partners in the company is Isabella Skonieczka, our head of design, and she's an outstanding designer, and she's had great people working with her over the years here. And we've done really great logo design for people. And then you look at it, sometimes you see it, and it's like, oh my gosh, it looked like they did it by themselves in PowerPoint. And the problem is, it's how do you tell somebody their baby is ugly? That's the issue. And so you take your run at it, and if you can open their eyes, that's great. If you can't, well, there's other people you can help. But everyone should take sometimes a fresh look at what they're doing and say, you know what, is this really working as hard as we can? And just on a practical basis, every X number of years, you need to at least tweak your logo. And if you just look at that core brand identity thing, is freshen it up, because sooner or later you're gonna look out of date. Just like you put a fresh coat of paint on your house. You sooner or later you have to do a major remodel of your kitchen, but along the way you might change the blinds or the curtains in the kitchen too. And
well, it goes with the aspect of, like, if you have something that just becomes stale, yes, you want to have that brand be the iconic brand, that logo lives forever. But in reality, sometimes you just become one of those 500 billboards you passed on the way that you just didn't look at anymore.
Even those logos that live forever get tweaked.
They do.
It's Coca-Cola, Pepsi, McDonald's, people like that. They come along every X number of years, and there's a little bit of a polish to that logo. You can still see it's organically what it was,
the integrity piece.
but it's been polished, and so even the biggest players know that they've got to keep up with the times and stay current looking.
Well, guys, I think this is a good moment to take a quick break and hear a word from our presenting sponsor, Trion Solutions. We'll be right back.
I'm Joe Vicari, President and CEO of the Joe Vicari Restaurant Group, which encompasses 24 restaurants throughout the country. Trion's able to provide for our employees health insurance, 401ks, vacation time. All of that helps us compete against larger companies for top talent. Happy employees make for great service, and that's what our restaurants are known for. That's why we rely on Trion.
You can always rely on Trion.
Welcome back to Members on the Mic with the Troy Chamber. We are here discussing all creative things. So, Mark, one thing I want to talk through is obviously you mentioned the Pure Michigan campaign. So that is something I believe everyone knows. Now, I am discouraged now knowing that you're from Ohio, by the way. We talked about that before. But can you tell us a little bit about what you learned for this? This is an immense campaign.
Well, it's actually something I just talked about. Sometimes you need fresh eyes. And Pure Michigan, I think, is a great example of that because, when you're in a big ad agency, 40 people work on an account, and inside that circle of 40 people, there's another 12 people who work a lot on it. But inside that circle, there's a circle of like 2 people or so who really crack the code on something. And so creating Pure Michigan was a gentleman named Dave Moore, and myself were at the heart of that. And he was the head of the creative department. I was the head of the strategy department. And we kind of knocked our heads together and came up with something, kind of a different way of looking at Michigan than they had really embraced in a long time. And the secret was neither of us was from Michigan. I think he grew up in Wisconsin. He'd moved to Michigan a couple of years before I did from New York, where he worked at, we were at McCann Erickson here in Detroit. He worked at McCann Erickson in New York, and they moved him over to head up the creative in Detroit. I was recruited out of San Francisco, arrived here in 2002, and I'd been here a few years, and he'd been here a few years, and when we started to work on it, we're like, well, let's do something different, and let's try to do something really big. And we literally had the conversation of, let's make a campaign that could last for 30 years, the way I Love New York has, the way Virginia's for Lover has had, and which is really unbelievably arrogant
It's a big dream.
to say.
That's a big dream.
but that's what we were trying to do. And so we wanted to have this bigness of spirit and really embrace the pride that people in Michigan have for Michigan. I like to say Michigan is to this part of the country what Texas is to that part of the country. It's the bigger state where the people are really proud of being from that state. But not just have it be hitting people over the head about, oh, look, all the stuff you can do in Michigan. We didn't talk about any of that stuff. We showed it, but really what we talked about was life and what life felt like in Michigan. And I think that us being outsiders, Dave and I being outsiders, really brought that fresh eyes to the tourism promotion of the state, that, this is how someone from outside of Michigan would be intrigued by Michigan. And so Pure Michigan kind of just rolled out from that. It was a great collaboration. We often argued about a lot of stuff, but on that one, we were just totally in sync. And I will say, it will probably be creatively, for me, the most lasting campaign I ever worked on. Campaigns are created to burn out after a while.
Yeah.
But it's next year is the 20th anniversary of Pure Michigan. So
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's still going. So good for them for buying it, and good for us for making it. And neither of us are from Michigan. I think we're very proud of that.
But you were from neighboring states, so you admired Michigan always.
No, I'm from Ohio. we did not. I would. My father would come back from beyond and
We'll leave
give
it
me
alone.
a talking to. Yeah, no.
I'm not even sure how to respond right now. We've talked a little bit about this earlier. Marketing trends are always changing. Everything's changing all the time and very quickly. What are some of the changes in advertising that our listeners who are in the marketing roles need to keep in mind?
More. It's the word more. Every year there's more. There's more ways to reach people. And I think that's the biggest thing. 25 years ago, I was working in San Francisco right at the peak of the dot-com tech boom and all that. And we had a tremendous portfolio of technology and dot-com clients, as well as others outside of that sector. And I remember that everyone was saying, 5 years from now, television is going to be dead. And television has been going to be dead for 5 years, for 25 years now. And so it's not, rarely do things go away. Probably the closest example of something that has, in a lot of markets, sadly gone away is daily newspapers, who, they went away because of the internet and specifically Craigslist, taking all those personal ads.
The ad space.
Yeah. As well as the big display ads from the department stores, et cetera. But beyond that, though, I mean, there are still magazines out there. There's still broadcast radio in addition to podcasts, in addition to satellite radio, in addition to streaming radio. There's more options than ever before. And that's the biggest thing, because then you have to figure out where do you show up and all that. Because unless you're a Coca-Cola or someone of that caliber and that budget, you can't be everywhere. So that's the biggest challenge that's all right now, is that every year there's more than there was the year before.
Yeah.
Is there a tip you could leave people with, maybe, that they could hone in on what works, or how they can look at what would work best for them?
Well, I would say, first of all, I'd say call me. Second of all, I would say really you got to be honest with yourself of who are you trying to reach, because you can't reach everyone. Yeah, and again, unless you had one of those giant General Motors, McDonald's, Levi's type of budgets, you can't reach everyone. So start with being honest with yourself of who you're really trying to reach, and because then the rest of itself should figure out, should follow that pretty easily.
So, question on this. So, we've talked a lot about branding. We've talked a lot about standing out. How does a smaller independent agency do that against some of the bigger players?
Well, I liked it. I was kind of brought up in the industry to think it's your work that makes you stand out, and so that's always the first thing. Don't do work you're not proud of. Otherwise, you're going to end up doing a career of doing work you're not proud of, and you might make a lot of money doing that, but in the end, I couldn't imagine being motivated to come to work like that. So that's first and foremost. And second of all, this is still a business where, networking helps, where word of mouth is very important, and people who you've worked with, being willing to pass your name off to somebody else they know. And I think we've had a lot of very satisfied clients who've a lot of the business we've picked up over the years has been somebody knew somebody and who knew us, and it came up that way. But I will still go back to the other thing. I think that the quality of your work is your best advertisement in this business. At least I hope it is.
Well, Mark, we appreciate you joining us here today. If
Thanks
you
for
could
having me.
leave our listeners with one nugget of something that they can take with them right now and start right away, what would that be?
I would say take a look at everything you're doing. It's, there's the whole thing. I don't have this problem, but, there's the whole thing about, when a woman, before she goes out, looks in the mirror, does the turnaround, looks in the mirror, and the first thing you catch your eye, get rid of. I have a client who's like, no, I want to put more on, but that less is more thing. But I'd say look at what you're doing, and then look at it with the eyes of someone who isn't the owner of that. And be honest with yourself. Is your messaging as good as it could be? Do your materials look as good as they could? Is your logo does it pop in this very crowded environment we have? Are you creating marketing and advertising communication that actually will move people instead of just blah, 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 make you happy?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think also those outside perspectives really matter because you're going to have a biased opinion of your own things. And if you even maybe think that it's great, you might be just doing that to defend the fact that you're trying to defend what your work was, when sometimes that outside perspective is really going to help drive it where it needs to go.
Well, again, it's no one likes to hear that their child isn't the most beautiful, wonderful, brilliant child in the world. And the other thing I'd say is if they're looking for, if somebody's looking for, whether it's a PR firm or a design agency or an ad agency or a media company, start by spending time on their websites. Really, because you'll find out the people who are doing advertising that you would like to have. And those are the people you should call, as opposed to just randomly getting a list of names of ad agencies and having them pitch you. We had a client once who they called us up out of the blue, and they said, we don't have a lot of money, but we'd like to hire you. Not we don't want you to pitch us. We spent time on all the websites of agencies of your size or mid-sized agencies as well, and we liked what you did. You had the right experience that we want, and we'd like to hire you. And so, what are you going to say no at that? Even they did not have a big budget, but they were fun to work with. And I can't share what it was because they haven't. We created a new brand for them that they haven't launched yet. But it was really great. They were great clients, and we picked up some additional spending money without having to add staff for it. So it was a great thing. So I'd say that's another piece of advice: is spend time on the internet, looking at the websites of the PR firms, ad agencies, what have you, in town, and see who's just doing work you like. That's who you want to work with.
Well, guys, that's all we have here today on Members on the Mic with the Troy Chamber of Commerce. Mark, thank you so much. Factory Detroit, you obviously are a wonderful creative guest, so just thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Perfect. And special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Trion Solutions. To learn more about the Troy Chamber or to join or for upcoming events, go to troychamber.com. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Bye now.
Bye-bye.